Welcome to the Odyssey. For 20 years, Odysseus is kept from the place where he belongs, first by war, then by wandering. Homer's ancient epic is not really about monsters or magic. It is about endurance and the quiet pull of home that never quite lets us go. Imagine being away from home for 20 years. Not because you chose to stay away, but because the world would not let you return. The winds blow the wrong direction. The sea throws you off course. The days become months. The months become years. And still, the horizon offers nothing familiar. This is the story of Odysseus, king of Ithaca, who spent a decade fighting a war and another decade trying to find his way back from it. It is one of the oldest stories we have, and perhaps the most human. Not because of its monsters or its magic, but because of its central, aching question: what does it cost to come home? The ancient Greeks understood the sea as few people have since. It was their highway and their mystery, the source of their wealth and the place where men disappeared. They built their lives around its rhythms, and they knew that anyone who sailed upon it was subject to forces beyond their control. The gods, in their telling, took interest in mortal affairs. Poseidon ruled the waves, and he was not a forgiving god. Athena watched over the clever and the brave. Zeus held the balance of fate. These were not distant abstractions, but presences that shaped the world, as real to the Greeks as weather or time. And Odysseus, for all his cunning, was never more than a man on their waters. He was known for his mind, not his strength. Where other heroes charged forward, Odysseus thought his way through. The Greeks called him many-minded, resourceful, never at a loss. It was Odysseus who devised the wooden horse that ended the war at Troy. But cleverness has its costs. The gods do not always admire those who think themselves equal to the task. The war at Troy lasted 10 years. When it finally ended, the Greek heroes set sail for home. Most arrived within weeks. Agamemnon returned to his palace, though what awaited him there was its own tragedy. Menelaus reclaimed his wife Helen, the face that had launched the war. Nestor reached his halls and lived out his days in peace. Odysseus did not. His journey would take as long as the war itself, and it would cost him everything except his life. He left Troy with 12 ships and hundreds of men. He would arrive home alone. The sea and its trials would take the rest, one by one, until only Odysseus remained. The man who always survived, the man who could not stop wanting to see his home again. The wandering took him to strange shores. There was an island where the inhabitants ate a flower that made them forget everything: home, family, purpose. Some of his men tasted it and no longer wished to leave. Odysseus had to drag them back to the ships, away from that sweet forgetting. It is a small moment in the story, but it haunts. How easy it would be to simply stop wanting what we cannot have. Each island offered its own trial. Each departure meant fewer ships, fewer companions, more distance from the life he had known. On one island, a goddess kept him as a guest, or perhaps a prisoner, for an entire year. She was powerful and beautiful, and she turned his men into animals before Odysseus convinced her to restore them. Even the immortals, it seemed, could be lonely. She grew fond of him, this mortal who was neither afraid of her nor awed into silence. She told him that to find his way home, he would first have to visit the land of the dead. And so Odysseus sailed to the edge of the world, to a place where the sun never shone, and spoke with ghosts. He saw fallen comrades from the war. He saw the great heroes of ages past. And he saw his mother there, who had passed away while he was wandering. He had not known. He learned it standing among the shades, too late to say goodbye. 3 times he tried to embrace her, and 3 times she slipped through his arms like smoke. The sea itself seemed determined to claim him. There were singers whose voices could lure sailors onto the rocks. Odysseus had himself tied to the mast so he could hear their song and survive it. He alone among mortals heard that music and lived to remember it. There were passages so narrow that destruction waited on either side. There were storms sent by angry gods and calms that lasted until the food ran out. One by one, the ships were lost. One by one, the men who had followed Odysseus from Troy found their endings far from home. Until at last there was only Odysseus himself, clinging to wreckage, washed up on yet another unfamiliar shore. The final island belonged to Calypso, a nymph who lived alone in a cave by the sea. She found Odysseus half drowned on her beach and took him in. She offered him immortality if he would stay. She offered him an eternity of peace, far from the struggles of mortal life. No more storms, no more loss, no more aging or death. He stayed 7 years, 7 years in paradise with a goddess who loved him. And every evening he would walk to the edge of the island and look out across the water toward a home he could not reach. Even eternity was not enough if it meant never seeing Ithaca again. What does it say about us that he refused immortality for the chance to grow old and die in his own country? Finally, the gods intervened. Calypso, with great reluctance, let him go. She helped him build a raft, and Odysseus set out once more across the empty sea. And what of home? All those years? What of the wife and son he had left behind? Penelope waited. That is the simple way to say it, but it does not capture the weight of it. She waited 20 years, never knowing if her husband was alive or dead, never quite giving up hope. Suitors filled her hall, young men who wanted the throne, who wanted her, who ate through the household's wealth while pressuring her to choose a new husband. Over 100 of them, growing bolder with each passing year. She held them off with cleverness and delay, weaving a shroud by day and unraveling it by night, buying time she was not sure she had. Her son Telemachus grew from infant to man without a father. He had no memory of Odysseus, only stories. He watched strangers feast in his father's hall and could do nothing about it. The house felt empty no matter how many people filled it. When Odysseus finally reached Ithaca, he came as a stranger. The goddess Athena disguised him as an old beggar, so he could see his home without being recognized. What he found was his hall filled with men who had taken everything but his wife's consent. He did not announce himself. He watched. He waited. He was mocked and mistreated by men who did not know who he was. And then he found his son and revealed himself in private, and Telemachus, who had never truly known his father, wept. Together they made a plan, and when the moment came, Odysseus reclaimed his home. The details of that reckoning are violent, and we need not dwell on them. What matters is that it ended. The usurpers were gone. The house fell quiet. The reunion of Odysseus and Penelope is one of the most moving scenes in all of literature. She did not believe it at first. 20 years is a long time. People change. Impostors had come before, claiming to be the lost king. She tested him, asking about their bed. That bed was their secret. Odysseus had built it himself, around a living olive tree that still grew through the floor of their chamber. No one could move it. No one else knew. And when he described every detail of its construction, the tree he had shaped, the inlay and leather and craftsmanship, she finally accepted that her husband had returned. They talked through the night, telling each other everything. All the years apart, all the waiting and wondering, compressed into a single conversation. In the morning, Odysseus went to see his elderly father, who had spent 2 decades grieving a son he thought was lost. The old man had stopped caring for himself, living in rags on the farm he used to manage with pride. When he recognized his son at last, his knees gave way. The family, so long scattered, was whole again. The Odyssey has been told and retold for nearly 3,000 years. We return to it because it speaks to something permanent in us, the knowledge that life will carry us away from the places we love, and the hope that we might find our way back. Odysseus endured because he never stopped wanting home. Not the glory of it, not the throne or the title, but the simple fact of belonging somewhere. The familiar shore, the bed he built with his own hands, the people who remembered him. He could have had immortality, and he chose instead a mortal life in a small rocky kingdom because it was his. The Odyssey. Thank you for listening.